welcome back to the next installment of this podcast. I'm joined again by my dear and wonderful friend Paul Szymczak. I did an episode with Paul toward the beginning of this year, and I think that I released it in like March or April or something along those lines, somewhere around in there anyway. And had him on, and we talked about just being craftsmen, teachers, what all of that entails, how it kind of can call out the best in a person, what we think about woodworking, as far as more of like a philosophical approach to what it's all about. But, one of the things that got me into woodworking was coming out to see Paul's shop and just kind of being out here and seeing everything that he had. And it really is kind of like walking into the past in many ways, that there are so many cool old tools that you get when it comes to doing your craft and whatnot, that I did say, I was like, well, we really, really need to do a podcast where I come and film the inside of your shop, talk with you about like your favorite tools and all of those good things, and just kind of like maybe look at some of your work and all that good stuff. Maybe we can even go out to your barn and look at the massive heaps of lumber that you have, some of which is mine, but nonetheless, here we are at the shop of Paul Szymczak, and we are sitting at the foot of one of his most prized possessions, and I suppose we can begin there, Paul. What do we have here?
This is an Uhlmeier workbench that I purchased at an auction. There was a nice old German gentleman who was selling off his life's collection of woodworking tools, and this was at the bottom of the pile. It was stacked full of all sorts of stuff, and so.
Didn't you think that it wasn't for sale?
Well, to be honest, I didn't even see it initially, because it was stacked full of everything under the sun, woodworking wise, and so I was watching everything sell, and eventually saw the workbench and thought, ooh, that's a really serious workbench. It's a nice one. And so I did the quick internet search to see what Uhlmeier was all about, and I know what I went to the house for, the frame saw.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. So we'll get that later.
Yeah.
But anyway, so recognized that it was a legitimate woodworking bench, and it was stout and a vast improvement over what I had to work off of. So I bought it for not much money.
Yeah, a very, very, very fair price.
Yes,
how much would one of these be worth, like if you were to buy one brand new these days? Because they're still in business, right?
They are in business, yeah. They are in Germany, which that complicates things because
right, you got to get it here.
Get it here from Germany. That's not necessarily easy to do. But
so the old gentleman that you bought this off of,
I think he
must have paid a very pretty penny for this particular bench.
He probably carried it across the dead zone there in the Berlin Wall.
Oh, okay.
He probably snuck this out of East Germany after the war, and his prized possession. But
how much does one of these run?
I think they run somewhere in the $4,000 range for And I assume that gets it to your house, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I paid about 10% of that. So.
Yeah.
And it's.
Which I keep. This is like the funny thing that we keep doing is I keep trying to talk him into selling this bench to me, but I also keep trying to offer him less than what he paid for it. So, but he got it for an absolute steal. I mean, if I would be out at an antique mall or at an auction and I saw this going for the price that you paid for it, I would absolutely pull the trigger on it because it is a very, very good bench. But the thing I would say that's kept me away from doing that is that I want to build my own bench eventually. But even building your own workbench,
You know what's handy to have if you're going to build a workbench?
A workbench.
Yes.
Yeah. Which Paul has, his own grand plans of building his own work of art to work from that point. But if you are looking at building your own workbench like what we are, we both really like the bench crafted vises, and those. I think the tail vise runs around $400 or so for the hardware, and then for the front vise, it's something like $600 to $800 or something like that. So just in the vises alone, for really good, well-made vises, you're looking at spending over $1,000 already, and then the lumber to build a bench like this. Which this is, I believe, a beech top. At least
I
that's
believe
what it
it's,
looks
yeah,
like.
the European beech.
Which would be very common for workbenches. Most of the time it's either beech or hard maple, ash, white oak sometimes. Probably what I will do is red oak on mine. But in any case, just in the materials alone, unless you cut down your own trees and do it that way,
Yeah.
which did more power to if you want to do such a thing.
Yeah.
You're looking at probably another $600 to $800 in just the materials, and then all of the skill and the know-how in building one yourself. So I suppose having a fine workbench and working from one is kind of like the high point of fine woodworking, fine craftsmanship. So, and you definitely have one of those. So
It's definitely a game changer to have a good stout, solid bench to work off of it, and with all the the bench dogs and it.
Yeah. And I guess if you don't know, this would be the front vise. So you can see it's a very, very stout, heavy front vise, and then he also has a tail vise here in a little bit. Now, what did you just put on the top of your bench there, Paul?
This is mutton tallow.
Now, what is mutton tallow?
It is sheep fat.
And why do you have a container of sheep fat?
Well, here's the deal. Mutton tallow makes an excellent rust inhibitor. And so these are my prized Ray Isles.
Ray
right?
Isles.
Ray Isles mortising chisels. And my shop is not heated, nor is it air conditioned. So it's it's subject to the climate changes and weather changes, and so occasionally condensation. But
we also live in rural Indiana, where you do kind of get the extremes of every season. It gets very hot and humid in the summer,
right.
and it gets very cold and frigid and snowy in the winter. So
yeah, and so it's a good rust inhibitor, and so you just smear a little of that on your tools to prevent them from rusting as the seasons change. Oh. And then the other thing is that it makes a really good lube for your soles of your planes.
Yeah.
And allows you to push them across the work easier, and doesn't stain the wood. At least I've not had it stain wood. There's no guarantee that it wouldn't at some point, but they actually sell it in like the beauty aisle, which I don't know what other people do with it, but that's what I use it for. And
yeah,
it's got a nice little picture of a sheep on there. So.
So where you got it from? Like an actual? You can get it from like Walmart or something?
I think so. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's fairly available.
Maybe the ladies know what you would use mutton tallow for. I know that back when the early colonists showed up here to fight against the mosquitoes, just will make you appreciate some things about our modern world, is that we have DEET mosquito spray, or those little things you can hook on yourself, and they'll repel mosquitoes and whatnot, but they would smear bear fat over their skin. Yeah, because it would create, it wouldn't repel the mosquitoes, they would still be all over you, but it would create that thick layer of fat to where they couldn't get their mouth to bite through it. So that was that brings the past to life in a whole new way. Yeah. So
that's almost as good as wearing your lucky ham out in the woods with predators around.
Well, and I love. I wonder if this is one of those things with woodworking. I suppose if there's any woodworkers that are watching this, which I do think there are a handful of woodworkers that are watching this podcast now.
That would make sense. It's kind of about that. So.
Well, you never know. I mean, this podcast is a little bit all over the place, although I think it's all unified in my grand plan. But I wonder if this is like one of those superstitions with regard to woodworking, or like, how baseball players, like they have all their little, things that they do, like Moises Alou, peeing on his hands and whatnot. But you've got, I use the Paul Sellers rag in a can method, where you take a rag or a T-shirt and you roll it up and you put it in an old can, and just makes a nice holder, and then you just soak it in 3-in-1 oil, and you're done with it. It kind of stays oily forever, and it also doesn't cause the wood to stain or anything like. At least if it does, I am none wiser to it, because I haven't noticed it having any impact whatsoever on the finish. But I know that people in the South, like down like Tennessee, Georgia, places like that, the woodworkers down there, as far as I understand, a lot of them use bacon grease.
Really?
Yeah. And you use mutton tallow. But there's a lot of people that use fat to put on their tools, which is kind of I don't know. I mean, I think the 3-in-1 oil is the way that I'm going to continue to go, but but it is what it is. So
to each their own. So.
Now, you did mention that you want to build your own workbench. Did you want to talk about anything with regard to that, of like what your or like perhaps like what you maybe think this bench? Because I mean, if this were the end-all be-all bench and you were completely happy with it, then I would assume that you wouldn't necessarily want to build another bench. So, is there anything that you would improve if you were to build another one, or would you make one very similar to this?
My plan, the grand design in my head, which, and I think we talked about that last time. When I build something, I build it over and over and over again in my head before I ever come to the shop. But I think I'm going to go with the split top roubeau style.
Okay.
That's one thing with the Umaya. It does have the tool tray across the back, which is handy, but it does collect shavings and sawdust and crap and everything else. So, the idea of not having that tray across the back, it'd be interesting to see how that plays over the long term. But and just and I know you're a mixed wood species type of guy. You like to mix it up on some of that stuff, but
I actually do not. I really like. No, I build a lot of furniture that's kind of become my thing, but a lot of craftsmen do it. My wife was the one who really was the big push behind that. She, whenever I started building something, she would be like, "Oh, that would look really cool," But I personally really like when I make just a solid oak dovetailed box. I really do just like the oak on oak. I think that looks best, but you know.
Well, then I'm not going to tell you about my workbench idea.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, anyway, the kind of the grand plan that's in my mind at the moment is to wrap it. You know, the outer bit of it will be hickory, because hickory is
Very
immensely
hard.
tough.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the main portion of the bench top will be hard maple, and then have a walnut divider, that center board in a roubeau that's removable that you can flip and make that walnut. So you'll see, you know, as you're looking across the bench, you know, you got your hickory, your clean white hard maple, and then that contrasted walnut, and then, you know, it just repeats going the opposite way. And that's, and the part, you know, the trestle part will be white oak, but not red oak, but white oak. But
So all of the things that you would criticize me for of mixing woods and whatnot, that's actually
yeah,
probably the finest piece of furniture that you'll build. Well, finest workbench that you'll build.
potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, with
In your head.
in my head, that's what it looks
It
like
contains
today.
all of the things that you would criticize me for.
Well, you know, the heart wants what the heart wants.
Well, I would offer you this, that when you do go to do that, you know, especially since, you know, my life is kind of taking me further and further away from this area, which I don't necessarily know if I like, but it would be really cool when you go to do that. There's a woodworker by the name of Frank Straza out of Texas. I would love to go and train under this man. He's incredible. Like he builds workbenches for other woodworkers. So I mean, yeah, I mean, like,
That's pretty good.
You know,
yeah. If you're
so
gonna do that.
people who are trying to do this at an incredibly high level, he's doing it at a way higher level
Yeah.
than everybody else. But
I may have seen some of his stuff.
oh, it's incredible. But he
Yeah.
does.
Does like the carving of your name and stuff.
He does really. That's. I would love to go and learn how to do wood carving and inlay from him. And I'm attempting to do my first inlay work right now. But if I get good at it, you know, I know that this workbench that you have planned to build is not going to happen anytime soon. But I would be honored one day if you would ask me. So this is me telling you to ask me that I would love to do the inlay of, like, you know, Paul Szymczak, you know, or
That would be cool.
you know, the old style woodworking, or whatever it is you wind up doing.
Yeah.
Whatever you would want it to be, that would be really, really cool to, like, inlay that on your tail visor, like right here or something like that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. But in any case, so we've got your whole shop here, which is just jam-packed full of every woodworking tool imaginable. You know, I mean, like, there's
I
just
haven't
so
even
much here
scratched
to.
the surface
yes, but I guess what do you want to tell people about? What are the tools that, you know? Like, I remember. I don't think that I finished the book, but I read portions of it. The Anarchist Tool Chest, and
The minimalist approach to,
yeah.
you know, here's what you need to do most
Right,
everything.
right. But
then there's the sickness of the mind approach, which is,
well, he did say something in that book that did jump out at me, that it is very true to form, I think, with a lot of woodworkers, that he was like, you know, at times I need to just come out in my shop and stand and you know, like, and be in the presence of of my tools, which I think goes back to a lot of my argumentation with what we're doing in a shop, being that there's something that is, there's this call from on high. It's kind of like you're in part, this kind of represents somewhat of a cathedral-esque type of feeling. And it's the same thing for me, that, you know, like, sometimes I need to just go out and be in my shop, even if it's just to clean it and organize it. I feel better being in
Yes.
this place, this little section of the world that I've cut out for myself, so that I can go and push my skills and try to become better and whatnot. At least that's my take on it. But
I just come out here to drink coffee.
yeah. Well, and you've told me, like that, even if, one day you're just, basically able to come out here and sit, feed the fire and drink coffee. And, there's just that aspect of being in your shop. So I guess what are the tools that, like, you come in on that day that you just need to see them and feel them in your hands, or check on them, make sure they're still there. What are those tools that come to mind that you'd like to talk about or anything?
Well, probably should explain a little bit about me as far as what you refer to as the sickness of the mind.
You do well. You refer to it as that you started it. After being around you. So we went to a tool auction one time, and I was interested in getting some wooden molding planes. And Paul, then all of a sudden, he was not interested in that before.
I had done really well at resisting the world of wooden molding planes.
Right, and
only because I didn't use them. So
yeah, and I have used them sparingly, but I use them from time to time. And I have a handful of them, but I'm very choosy and picky. I don't have the greatest amount of space to be able to store tools and whatnot, so I don't really have the ability to do that. But he looked at me on the way down to this tool auction in Indy, and he was like, I'm going to buy some wooden hand planes. And I was just like, oh, okay. What made that? He's like, I don't know. You talking about us kind of made me want to do that. And there was the bane of a woodworker's existence are tool collectors that drive up the price of tools at an auction. And there was something that took a hold of you that, like, as we got toward the end of the auction. And this auction took forever. There was thousands of tools that they were auctioning off and whatnot.
They were.
Oh yeah, I mean,
along.
like this auctioneer, I don't know how he didn't keel over and die part of the way through, because like the dude was a stud. But it got probably about 2/3 of the way through, and Paul hadn't bought anything yet, and he made his mind up.
It's game on.
That he was going to leave this place with. Not, what did you wind up getting, like 20, 30 molding planes or something like that?
Yeah, probably. It was.
But I mean, like the number just kept going up, and I just it was like he was in a trance. He was just, and he had made his mind up. It was like, I am leaving here with that box of molding, and I could tell that he was really kind of upsetting this other guy that had bought like all these other things, and it was like an ego thing that I think it was just I will defeat you. And I just like kept looking over, and I was like, he's not going to stop. He's going to do this. So
yeah. So it happens.
But in any case, so the sickness of the mind you have and whatnot.
Yeah. So I find things that I like, and so then I and you mentioned, that word collector. So, I collect them with the purpose of using them. And so, I tend to buy things just, for the sake of having them in my shop.
Yes.
Because they make me happy. Hand screw clamps. They're all made by the Adjustable Clamp Company in Chicago, Illinois. The Jorgensen style, and I can't explain how or why. One day I saw those and thought, oh, those are cool.
Yeah.
And they were inexpensive. My wife and I like to travel around to antique markets and antique shops and stores and malls, and so I mean we go a lot to see these things. And, they're almost everywhere. You can find them.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you can find them for, less than $10 a piece.
Yeah.
And
Every
so
time I see one, now my wife looks at me and she's like, you should call Paul. You should tell him. I'm like, I can't feed the fire.
I actually have gotten in a better place as far as these clamps are concerned.
I've gotten in a better place.
I've walked past them now. I don't buy all that I see. But
You do flirt the line there with, I mean, there are very few degrees of separation between you and the TV show Hoarders,
yes, which
I mean, like, it is under control
mostly
to a degree,
yeah,
but we'll say that, like, when you die, whoever inherits your tools
this is gonna
will be a very happy man.
yeah, this is, and that's, that goes back to kind of that idea of the legacy that we talked about in terms of, the things that we make. But, the shop itself is a project.
Yeah.
And that's, it's, I suppose we probably should talk about the building itself. It's a pole barn, 24 by 32. And it was on the property when we bought it. It was one of the reasons why we were attracted to this property. It had a nice big timber frame barn, and it had this shop, which I think the guy used as like an automotive shop. I think that was one of his side deals, was working on cars and stuff. When we bought this place, we bought it contingent upon us being able to sell our house. Well, the lady that she accepted our offer, and then she got another offer, a better offer. But so we had, like, the financing thing was kind of iffy, and as far as getting our house sold, and we weren't really. We probably could have run a couple of months with 2 mortgages, but it was one of those things where we were really hoping to get our place sold. Well, then our realtor called us and said, "Hey, we got a cash offer on your place." And so we're like, yes. And so, we were all giddy, and he's like, "But," and so it's like, okay, what's the but? And the answer was that they wanted possession at the end of the week.
Oh.
Because they had all of their worldly possessions loaded up in vehicles and vans and trucks in Montana.
Ready to go. Oh, yeah.
And they were leaving Montana like the next day, and they were going to come here, and they had no place to go.
Yeah.
So they're like, "We need your house, or we want to buy your house, but we need it Saturday."
Right.
And so we're like, how are we going to do this? So this building was empty, mostly empty. And so we talked to the lady that we bought our house from, and we said, "Okay, here's the deal. We got our place sold, so we're good to go. We're going to buy it." And she's like, "Good," and that's. But then we said, "We need to move now, like this week."
Like yesterday.
Can we just move our stuff into the pole barn? Because we hadn't closed, we hadn't done anything. She's like, "Oh yeah, that's fine." And then because we wanted to paint paint in the house and do some stuff before we moved in, and she was very gracious and let us just come in here and dump all of our worldly possessions into this building. Well, and that was great, but then the ramifications of that is that there are this started off with all sorts of stuff in it that didn't belong in it, and it's taken me almost 20 years to get all of that stuff. And there are still things in here, if we looked through some of the cupboards and stuff, that we would be like, "Why is this in the wood shop? It doesn't belong here." But it got here because it did. So but anyway, it's 24 by 32 pole barn, not heated, not really insulated. It's got some foam on the ceiling, but the plan is to seal it all up good, get the spray foam insulation and all that good stuff, and then finish it off on the inside, get a heat source, maybe heating and cooling. My wife, Julie, she's not a big fan of working out in the heat. So
Yeah.
she's talked about
Most people in general are not, but
yeah. So climate controlled would be an improvement, and that would be good for the tools and everything. And that's part of the reason why I've resisted making major investments in power tools, as far
Right.
as like a big fancy table saw and a big planer and things like that, just because I want to have the building done first. And so,
Yep.
but where's that going with this? We're talking about the all the stuff, the
Yeah.
tools. So yeah, when I do come out here, obviously sharp chisels are good, and we've had plenty of discussions about chisels. We showed you the Ray Isles mortising chisels, which are phenomenal. The I bought the Lee Nielsen socket chisels. I like those. I know you went with the Ashley Isles,
Yep.
and those are really nice chisels as well.
They are.
So good chisels, that makes things fun. Saws, good sharp saws.
Which I do want to take a break real quick here, because I said that I was going to talk about these. And if Paul is gracious enough, I may actually sharpen one of these up out here and test it out and record it while I'm here. These are my bar timber framing tools. My wife and I went to Maine last summer to learn how to do, I did a design build course and then a timber framing course through a group out of Maine called the Shelter Institute. And they have a deal worked out with this incredible craftsman. I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I will not I will not speak, poorly of the guy's name by mispronouncing it. But it's Bar Tool, and they make to my knowledge, I don't know of any other American companies that kind of specialize in making timber framing chisels, but these are incredible tools that come pretty sharp right out of the box, and they are you would use this 1.5-inch framing chisel for driving, removing the waste of a mortise hole or something along those lines, and then this slick is for taking the fine shavings. So getting the tenon true to where it'll fit into the mortise hole, or shaving the cheeks of the tenon. So this is a 1 7/8 timber framing slick, and this is an 1.5-inch timber framing chisel. So those are a couple of tools that I decided to bring over to show to Paul, because that's what annoying woodworkers do, is we show off our tools to one another. And as you can see back here, Paul has a big old slick, which Paul has been gracious enough to help out, which when I say gracious enough to help out, he would probably be offended if I did not have him come down while I'm doing this whole timber framing project. Hopefully, we're going to be moving on that at the first of this year. But in any case, what other tools or... I did tell you I wanted just... and I, like I said, I'll do overlays of all this stuff, showing, Paul's incredible little shop that he has built for himself over the years. Which I guess, how long ago, just for, let's say we've got, well, actually, this is a bit of an aside. I talked to Rob Cosman on the phone, okay, and which was just kind of cool. I bought a little tool from Rob Cosman. I need to buy another tool from him, actually, now that I think of it. But I was talking to him on the phone, and he said that he was like, I really think that YouTube and young people are going to be the thing that saves woodworking and craftsmanship. Is he's like, when he started in his career as a woodworker, he went out and would be talking. It was mostly old guys that were dying off. Mm-hmm.
And that's how I get such a good deal on some of my
Exactly,
tools there.
yeah. But he's like, I've been going to a lot of these tool shows and stuff like that, and he's like, it's actually younger guys that are around your age. I think that was last year that I talked to him on the phone. So I was 32 at the time, and he was like, yeah, he's like, it's these younger guys that are getting pretty big into the whole hand tool woodworking anyway, and having an interest in that. He's like, there was, these years there where you had guys that, pretty well did everything using planers, routers, drill, like whole lines of tools that were created, just for people who don't really want to take it as far as the whole hand tool side of things. But he's like, that young people are really, really getting into it. So assuming that we have a younger guy that is wanting to get into all of this, how long has it taken you to acquire this this massive amount of tools, and would you do it differently, I suppose, after? Because do you mind me asking how old you are?
I am 49.
The fact you had to think about that tells us that
Tells
you're
us
actually
it's old.
50.
No. Next year.
You're actually 50, but
No, next
we
year.
have an inside joke in the old social studies department there that Paul is too old to remember how old he is. So we always say that he's off by a year, but he actually brought in, was it your birth certificate or something? You had your birth certificate on you one day for some reason, and we were roasting you about it, and you were like, "No, I have my birth certificate right here."
Yeah, I had to get my driver's license so I could fly on airplanes.
So 1973, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But in any case, so how long has it taken you to acquire this massive amount of tools that you now own?
I actually started acquiring woodworking tools due to my wife. She bought me for Christmas one of those little Craftsman sanders, a little electric mouse sander type of thing. And because I had always watched, the New Yankee Workshop and the who was the Roy Underhill guy, Woodwright Shop.
Woodwright Shop.
Yeah, and so I watched those things, and she knew I was interested in woodworking, and I was always building, just not really woodworking stuff, but building stuff around the house. And so she thought, well, here's some woodworking stuff to get you started, and some clamps. And
so Julie is the one to.
She really is. She has sown the seeds of her own downfall. Yeah, and so, but
that's great.
Once we moved here, and this was 94, no, 2004. So about 18 years ago, and I had this building to serve as as the future shop of Paul Szymczak. Then I started getting a little more serious about the woodworking and started acquiring the tools and clamps and various other things. So just under 20 years to get all this stuff so far. And that's, one of the things that I, once again, sickness of the mind, but when we go on a trip somewhere, day trip, we run somewhere, we go somewhere where there's potentially some sort of woodworking tool to be had, I hate coming home empty-handed. So I buy, a $10 hand clamp or, a bevel gauge or a marking gauge, and a lot of these things can be had very inexpensively. So that's, it's the death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
So I buy a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Well, at some point we need to do an investigative expose on marking gauges and bring all of my marking gauges out and put them in one place.
That's one of my things too, which I will actually make this a smaller clip. I don't necessarily know if I like all of this because like you can look like an idiot sometimes when you put yourself out there online like this, but if you are a woodworker, I guess comment down below on this video that I'll put on like Instagram and Facebook of like what's your tool that as you're like walking through an antique mall or something like that, that's very hard for you to turn down. So Paul's obviously would be Jorgensen hand clamps. Mine would be Henry Disson hand saws of any kind. Like I am absolutely green with envy because Paul acquired this 8-inch, very, very pristine condition Henry Disson 8-inch dovetail saw, which it is.
The storm is here.
Yes, the storm has arrived. Welcome to Indiana. If you don't like the weather, just wait 10 minutes. But
yeah.
But anytime I see a handsaw like this, which these things can be just extravagantly expensive or found very cheaply. It just depends on who knows what they have and whatnot. But you got this for $30.
I think it was around $30. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have seen these for thousands of dollars, literally. We're
getting
if you see some dust kicked up, we've got a storm coming through. But yeah, if you're a woodworker, like my thing would be marking gauges, Henry Disson hand saws. Like I want to buy every single one of them that I see. So what is your thing, I guess? Well, I guess this podcast is running about as long as I wanted it to anyway. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about in your shop? I mean, I know I'm going to go through and record, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'll take pictures of all of your tools that you want to show off, any of your work that you want me to see. I'll get that out there so that people can see it and overlay it at the places that we were talking about it and whatnot. Okay. But is there anything else that jumps out at you, or?
Not particularly. I know we talked about the wood piles out in the barn, and just the massive amounts of wood that have come my way. But we'll have you take a picture of it. But in the back of the shop there's some boards that came out of that haymow of the barn they tore down the road. They're 19 inches wide.
Oh, wow.
And they're going to be at some point turned into something, but when was the last time you found a 19-inch board somewhere that was in a pile that was fit to be or set to be burned, that you could have rescued out? So
well, that's a whole different subject in and of itself of there's a joy of working with your tools, but then there's also just the beauty of the material itself. It really just is all around an incredible experience. I don't know why everybody doesn't, want to do woodworking.
Yeah.
Kind of hope it stays that way because it makes buying tools a little bit easier these
Yeah,
days.
you know, you don't have as much competition for all the goodies. But,
No, if this gets even one young person into doing something that makes their life better and dedicates himself to doing something good with their life, then I consider that to be an incredible win. But yeah, I mean, I just love this shop, and I too, some of the best times of my life have been just coming over here, and I mean, half the time that I come, or more than half the time I come over here, we don't even go to your house. We just meet, just meet up out here and stand in the shop
everything
and
we
talk.
need's out here, other than the bathroom and running water. But
So I guess just one last question, I suppose, would be, what's your favorite tool in this shop? What's the
favorite tool in the shop?
If you had to pick one, what would be the one that you would?
It's like Highlander. There can be only one.
Yeah.
God.
And we won't count the bench.
Okay.
I'll be fair. I mean, like that's.
Yeah.
I love asking these questions just because
Yeah.
it's fun to see you squirm.
Well, yeah, because I mean, everything has its purpose, and when you're doing the thing that needs to be done,
Yeah.
the right tool for the job is obviously.
That's a very profound. Yeah, that's a very profound way of looking at it. In that moment, it's this is now my favorite tool.
Yeah, if I'm, cutting dovetails, it's going to be a saw. But yeah, it's. I would, if I had to take just one with me, or one set of something. Such terrible questions.
I've asked you just like this is such a, I can see the pain that I've got. It's great.
Yes.
This is awesome.
Yeah, terrible. You're a horrible human being. I really enjoy every day when I walk in here seeing the array of hand screw clamps.
There you go.
And that I really enjoy, because that's a lot of good times acquiring all of those. And when you, especially the small ones are the tricky ones to come across.
Yeah.
And so when you can find one of those out in the wild, and you're like, oh, and then the guy's like, oh, $5, and you're like, you can't get your wallet out of your pocket fast enough to pay him, and it's like, yeah, I'll take that. And that that's there's a reason why woodworkers always universally say you can never have too many clamps.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer of that, although I will have to redesign the clamp rack or expand it or turn the herd. But the other day, last month we were up in Michigan, and that guy had a big pile of big furniture clamps. I showed you the picture, I think. And how much? How about $5? Or he said, how about $5? And I'm like, dollars? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, he said, which one do you want? I said, I'll take them all. So, you can't pass stuff up like that.
Yeah.
And so.
And clamps are just such a, it's like if you're ever having a problem in the shop, then the clamp is ultimately going to be the thing that winds up fixing that particular problem. You know what I mean? Like,
generally speaking, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even if you can't, I've heard Paul Sellers, who is one of the best that's out there in the business. He's literally said that there's no problem in assembly that a hammer and a bunch of clamps cannot fix.
Yes, been there.
That's so true. And when I've heard Rob Cosman talk about that he's busted out some big pipe clamps or smaller hand clamps, and he's like, when I was a young woodworker, and I think every young woodworker has been here, that I have put so much pressure on these clamps that they are bending in the center to get everything to come together, and it's so true, and that represents a lot about our work and whatnot of how much it improves over time. That you figure out that perfect fit to where the need for all of that kind of becomes, but it's nice to always have it. So I suppose that the woodworker's shop in part represents that struggle against this natural element of the wood, that it's like, if I'm ever in a pinch, then I have these tools to get everything fixed up. But we are storming away back here, and I imagine you can probably hear some of the wind rushing around and whatnot, and the
rain
coming on the ceiling, which would make for an excellent nap, but probably not for the greatest of podcasts. So, Paul, I appreciate you letting me come out to your shop.
I appreciate you giving me the impetus to clean up the shop enough to make it somewhat presentable, because it was not several months ago.
But always a pleasure to come out here, and I'm very happy to bring the world into your shop. So hopefully this will maybe get a number of young people that maybe want to get into something like this, because I really do think that everybody needs something like this in their life. So but thank you for having me. And what else would you want to say? Or
I was just going to say, you don't have to invest the thousands and thousands of dollars to get into woodworking. That
I guess that is a good question. One last question, and then we'll call it quits here. But would you do it any differently?
Yeah.
Like knowing today, like basically like I'm asking, if you knew today what you knew, when you were in your early 30s and started kind of undertaking all of this, when you were about my age, or for me, talking about 6, 7, however many years ago I started getting into all of this, like, would you just have taken a lump sum of money and just gone out and, bought Lee Nielsen, all brand new tools and whatnot, maybe gone to some antique stores, but like you did the research, you found out exactly what you needed, and maybe it's like 20 years ago, if you would have spent $20,000, it would have saved you a lot of heartache, and you would have been able to make the process of becoming a better craftsman, you would have maybe expedited that process. Would you have done that differently, or would you have taken this slow approach to things that you have over time?
That I'm a big believer that it's the journey and not the destination. And so, the journey that I've gone on with this is I wouldn't not do that.
Yeah.
Only because it's just that little moment where you find this in the case and you're like, ooh, and then you get it out and you look at it and you're like, that's really nice.
Right.
And then you look at the price and you're like, that seems light. And then, you check it just to make sure it's not all bent up or anything. And then you're like, huh. And then you see that they got 20% off on the booth, and you're just like, this is coming home with me. And, so I mean, that process, if it weren't tools, it would be something else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in that regard, that part of the journey I wouldn't trade. But I have bought a lot of tools over the years that look like tools, but they're not really.
Yeah. They're not getting the use that.
Yeah, and like block planes. For a while there, I was buying pretty much every block plane I could get my hands on. And then you learn a little bit about, the difference between an adjustable mouth block plane and a non-adjustable mouth block plane, or a low-angle block plane versus a standard pitch block plane. And those sorts of things, you figure out what it is that you use and what you need to do what you need to do, and you don't need 30 or 40 block planes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that I have 30 or 40 block planes, but I have a very small select set of block planes that I use routinely.
Yeah.
And they're nice. They're invaluable. You know, they're when you need them. Like I said, you know, when that's the job that you're doing, that's the favorite tool. Is
right.
But you know, I've spent a lot of money on things that I didn't really necessarily need.
Yeah.
But you know, once again, you know, it's something that I feel like I don't regret doing it.
Yeah.
But, you know, but also, you know, if you wanted to really be serious into woodworking and had to be economical with things, you know, doing the research is probably really, really important. And making sure, and you do a really good job with that, of, you know, seeing what's out there and what you need, and, you know,
well, I've had
not buying the entire set.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to need these 3 chisels. I don't need the set of 10. And so, you know, you have been good about that.
Yeah.
I tend not to be. I like to have the full set. You know.
Well, and I think that is a good place to end, especially since we're getting pretty close to the point of shouting over one another out in your shop here. But it is really coming down out there. But
it is, yeah.
But, well, thanks for having me in your shop.
We should probably watch the weather alerts and make sure we're not getting a tornado.
Yeah, we'll just see your barn in the back go flying.
The brand new barn roof flies off. They just finished putting it up yesterday, but it was good timing.
But, well, hey, thank you for having me. And
thank you for coming to visit.
We'll definitely have you on again.
It's always good to see you.
Yep. See ya. Thanks.